Welcome to the Life Writing Podcast, where married authors and screenwriters Stephen Barnes
And Tananarive do talk about writing during stressful times, breaking into Hollywood, and balancing life.
every week-ish will share more tips on how to build a better life while you create your dream projects.
Even if it's only at the rate of one sentence a day. Life writing is the application of the tools of writing to life and the tools of life to your writing.
Yay! Welcome, everybody. Woo! Where you been? We've been right here. So I
Yep.
don't know where y'all have been, but we have never missed a Sunday podcast. Actually, I think the idea that this drops on Sundays is more of an idea at this point. This drops when we can drop it, basically. But we're doing our best. And we have a surprise. It's not going to be a surprise because I'm about to tell you. For our Valentine's Day podcast, we have booked the director of what's I hope will soon to be the new hit horror movie, Hard Eyes, Josh Rubin.
Hard Eyes was great fun.
So much fun. You need to see it. It's out this weekend. You need to
That's
see it,
right.
people. It's a new must-watch holiday horror film.
That's
Even
right.
if,
It's the new favorite Valentine's Day horror film.
absolutely. And if you don't like Valentine's Day, because I know when I was single in my 20s, I hated Valentine's Day. It's so
Hmm.
perfect for that too. It's like for everyone, whether you love Valentine's Day or hate Valentine's Day, there's something in this movie for you. So, darling,
Yes.
I was thinking, let's talk about what's going on. So much is going on.
It's true. This has
Woo.
been, the last couple of weeks have been intense, but
Intense.
we've got through some of that intensity yesterday and today. We're setting up a new playground for our life writing people. Creating, a lot of people are fleeing from some of the other social media platforms whose names we will not mention. And we're looking to create a safe space where we can run things our way, which is a positive place on the internet for people who are writers and fans of writers. So there'll be, it's if we do this right, you guys will get invitations to come over there and play, and it'll be a good time. We'll also have courses and things like that are available, but we just want to have a safe place for our people. So
A
that's been taking
whole.
up a lot of our energy.
It has because birthing something is tough, but we're already seeing the benefits of it. We're excited about it. We have a clearer vision of how to do it this week than we had last week, which is great.
Much
And it
more
is
better than it had just 2 days ago.
true,
Just two
true.
days ago, I was waking up not sure what it was that I wanted, and then as I recall, I laid out the plan to you, and it was complicated enough that it took some time
Yeah.
to kind of for it to make sense.
We worked through it. Now we're both excited. There's just a learning curve. And you, as life writing listeners, are the perfect kind of people to be hanging out with us when we do get this site up and running. So you'll definitely, definitely be hearing more about that. Besides that, I hear there's some stuff going on in politics that I'm not really going to get into right now. Although I am going to give you the same advice I gave my students today in class, because I do feel like it's a form of
What would that
gaslighting
be?
students. It's like gaslighting to pretend everything's fine when they're terrified that ICE might knock on their door and take their grandmother or whatever. So, what I told them is you have to really regulate how much of that stress you take in. An executive order is a wish, it is not something that is necessarily going to happen. Many have already been struck down by courts. Yes, there will be losses. Yes, there will be things that a lot of us get upset about, but don't stress out about stuff that are literally ideas that haven't happened yet. Save your energy for something that is actually happening. And then if you want to engage, fine. But also, if you listen to this podcast, you know that we are strong believers that a writing practice is a great antidote to stress.
It's true.
So lean into your art, lean into your art.
We actually did a talk basically about how we can use art to deal with stress. And that video where we created that is actually available at writerwebinar.com.
Yeah.
and you'll find out about a lot of the things that we're doing if you go there. But you need something, you know, we stress is fear. And when there are things that are happening that are not happy making, it is very easy to slide into that. So, what I kind of suggest is that you have at least three different means of dealing with stress: one physical, one emotional, and one mental. The mental one might simply be don't doom scroll first thing in the day. You
Oh
know,
my gosh.
you spend the
Yes.
first hour of the day, listening to positive things, watching positive videos. Go to YouTube. There are tons of videos and audios that have to do with positive thought and self improvement and gratitude and so forth. Deliberately do that. Deliberately focus your attention there. In terms of emotions, connect to your friends and family. Get hugs, play with a kitten. This is medication for the soul. We're talking about the fact that, fear and love compete for the same place in your heart. Gratitude is an antidote for anxiety. So if you spend 15 minutes a day thinking about gratitude and all that you have, the blessings that you have in your life, it will really, really help protect you. And then the third one is your body. I mean, the truth is that in a lot of ways, the body is first, because if you will go for a walk and you are walk briskly, you're actually going to engage with the mechanisms that help us deal with fear evolutionarily. If you go for a walk and at the same time you're thinking about what you have to be grateful for, even better. And if you go to a walk, think about gratitude and you're listening to a positive podcast as you go, now you are actually programming yourself to have a great day if you
You
start your
know
day
what?
like that.
If only I could think of a positive podcast to recommend that people listen to on their morning walk. So this is absolutely one, but there are others. I listen to Rachel Rogers' Hello Seven podcast. She wrote the book We Should All Be Millionaires, and I think she has some great thoughts on the ways we undervalue ourselves, and having more money is a great way to fight stress. So I find
You know
that
what I like,
empowering.
what I really like of hers is the daily seven. I mean, she talks about the things that we need to do in order to take care of ourselves. And let's see, what it's like the seven are: you delegate one task on your to-do list to other people every day. You move your body. We were just talking about that. Exercise. Connect with your squad. In other words, have someone who shares goals with you that you are going to talk to every day, or at the very least once a week, but she's recommending every day. You do one money generating activity every day. You do something. What did you do? You think $1 million thoughts. In other words, you check the thoughts you have. She talks about, what is it she talks about? Bad
Broke
thinking,
ass
BAD.
thinking.
Yeah, BAT thinking, broke ass thinking. Stay out of that and into millionaire thinking, which is, possibilities and thinking big and so forth and so on. And number six is to look at your money every day. Every day you go on your bank app and you look at what you've got. In some way you keep track of that. If it hurts, use that pain to motivate you. If it feels good, celebrate. And the seventh one is really interesting, and it's difficult for a lot of people. Enforce your boundaries.
Say
That
that.
you have to be very careful of what and who you let into your mind and your heart and your circle. Be sure not to share your dreams with anyone who cannot support them, and be very careful of energy vampires as well as people, that whole crabs in a basket thing, where people who do not believe that they can change positively will try to discourage you from thinking that you can. Because if you can, then it invalidates their position and tears down their defense mechanisms. So all this stuff is important for writers. I mean, in thinking about how we're going to operate as writers. For instance, I've made a lot of money in my career, but I didn't hold on to it. I wasn't
Mm.
thinking like a millionaire. I wasn't thinking about investing my money in goods that appreciate as opposed to depreciate. I wasn't saving enough. So I'm having to change all of that. And it's not easy. If you did not come from money, it's very easy to have negative views of it. And
And
go ahead.
I just want to jump in there because, especially in our current environment where, billionaire is a dirty word, and there are a lot of bad actors out there right now. So that can reinforce that feeling that there's something about money that makes people evil. And I think we need to slow our roll on that. We're not billionaires, and most of us are not going to be billionaires. Okay. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about giving yourself permission to ask for what you're worth. And I think one of the key factors for me was that because I love to give to a bail fund. I love to mentor, all that stuff, right? So sometimes when people talk about making money, it makes me feel like, but I want to help people. It's like, no, I can still do that. I can still give to the bail fund. I can still mentor people. It's just don't make your charity your business. And when you can distinguish between those two things, between what is your charity work and what is your business, it really helps clarify. Because guess what? If your business starts to thrive, you can afford to give more to your charity work.
Yeah. And she makes the comment that a business that does not make money is a hobby. It is
Right.
very important for you to remember what business is about. And for artists, because we aim a lot of this life writing is, primarily for artists, primarily for writers. And writers and artists can have real problems with wanting to put a dollar sign on what they earn. They really can. They can have, it can be a nightmare for them to think about marketing and sales.
Mm.
And just like, the notion that, billionaires are evil, I don't have any, I've only met a couple of, there's not a good or a bad there. And I think that the question about whether or not billionaires are good for the world is a separate issue. If you have a sense that money equals evil, that money is the root of all evil, there are plenty of people who think that they're above that. They think, they're atheists, they don't believe in the Bible, this, that, and the other. But on some level, they do believe money is evil. They have that negative association there, arguably because they spent so much time making money doing something they didn't like to do.
Mm.
That the process of earning money was certainly evil for them. It may be for their parents. Just money never seemed to be anything but something that people fought over.
And
So
bosses and landlords who caused hardship in their earlier lives and things like
yeah,
that.
it's
So
true.
yeah.
And the sad thing there is that I think that the problem with landlords and bosses isn't their character, it's the role. That if you become a landlord, suddenly you will start empathizing with what the landlord was going through. If you become the boss, you're going to start empathizing with what the boss goes through, and your employees are going to talk about you the same way you used to talk about your boss. So if you're gonna work for yourself, you're the executive function part of you is going to be at war with the core creative part of you. This kind of wanted to lead this into our theme and our subject for today. That one of the things that happens is that the kid part of you wants to play and be told, patted on the head, and said they're a genius. The adult part of you needs to discipline, needs to get the kid to work when it's time to work, and needs to be able to handle feedback from the people whose money you're trying to get, whether it's your partners, your producers, your editors, whatever. You have to be able to look at feedback as a positive thing rather than a threat to your ego. And I would
I
like
see
for
what
you
you're
to kind of
doing
take this
there.
away. Absolutely.
You're moving toward our topic. Let's let's talk about our topic today, which is basically dealing with feedback, navigating feedback, both for your writing and in your life. How about that? Life writing, get it? And the reason this is kind of at the top of my mind is because when I reached a certain point at my novel in progress, about 300 pages in, I gave it to both Steve and my agent, Donald Moss, so that they could read it and give me feedback. And I'm on pins and needles as I always am before I get feedback. Lots of great feedback from both of them. Both of them had thoughts and ideas about changes I could make to make it even better. That's why we ask for feedback in case we're mistaken about it. It's because we want to improve our work, whether it's a manuscript or whatever kind of work it is. And I found myself almost with an embarrassment of riches because Steve is himself a world-class writer. Donald Moss, in addition to being an agent, is also himself a writer. So they're spitting good ideas, you know what I mean? And at a certain point, it's not just like, oh, I don't feel like doing that, but there is some of that. There's always, you can tell yourself you're not having that, but there's always some of that. Oh, I don't feel like it. I like it the way it is. But also there was a concern I had that their ideas were so good that I might be swayed away from my little quiet inner voice that knows exactly what I'm trying to accomplish with this book and exactly how I'm trying to accomplish it. So I was kind of, I'm not going to say paralyzed, but marinated in the feedback for some time. I marinated in the feedback, and there were a lot of ideas in common. And I think that's one of the biggest tips is that if you've given a couple of different people or more than one person something to read, those things that people say in common are the first things you need to pay attention to. That's where, and frankly, I'll even reveal without details the nature of it. There was too much summary. I was writing too quickly, and there was a scene that took place. I'm not going to say which film. There's a scene where my character is on the set of an iconic film from old Hollywood, meeting iconic actors who were in that film for the first time. And I referred to that scene in past tense, like something that happened while y'all weren't here. Like last year, guess what happened to her? Guess who she met? And she's thinking about it now. And that's like almost embarrassing now when I look back on it, because I've had such a blast actually going back to research it, watch the film that I was referring to, which I had actually never seen, read more about the actors she was interacting with so I can try to capture their voices and I don't get those well actually letters from all the cinephiles who will be like, well, he never would have said that or whatever. And I'm having the best time. I'm having the absolute best time. Now, there are some ideas I won't use. I still think they're good, but sometimes it's like, that's not quite the right fit for me. But one of the hardest things to do as a learning writer, because you're so dependent on feedback, I really think it's the fastest way to grow. Workshops, beta readers who are themselves skilled enough to understand how they can help you and not just because they love you. It's the fastest way to grow. Writers in isolation do not often grow, not nearly as quickly as writers who are willing to share their work. I think that's
Look,
just a fact.
let me share some thoughts about this. First of all, when you get feedback from other people, I look at it, if I've chosen them properly, I want their comments to be kind of the way I would think about this manuscript if I could put it down for a year. The problem is that
Mm.
you fall in love with your writing. You fall in love with what it is that you've done. You're also dealing with the fact that it's going to take work. I look at the summary that you were doing as not as a symptom of avoiding work, but a symptom of you were racing. You had a lot of emotional momentum. It took you 7 years to do the previous book, and I think that there's a way in which you were simply overreacting rather than and you can't, when you
Oh, heck
when a
no, that's not
pendulum,
happening again. Right.
yeah, when a
Yeah.
pendulum swings, it doesn't stop dead in the middle. It goes back the other way. So that was what I saw. But here's what I think about feedback in general. That if the three gates are, is it true, is it kind, is it useful? The question of how do you know when something is useful? And you know that something is
Yes.
useful if it achieves the desired result. If it gets you feedback. Now, if it gets you the reaction that you wanted, and if you're striking a match, you want the match to catch fire. That is a physical result. Was it a good match? It caught fire. Good match. If a map is good, you'll get to your location. If a story is good, you have to sit back and ask yourself, well, what is a story? And a story is a series of images and words that are designed to create a cascade of emotional reactions in your audience. That you feel an emotion, you use your skill with words and sequencing in order to trigger their reaction. They have this reaction followed by another, followed by another, followed by another, and then the lights come on, and all that cascade happens, as they realize that they've survived the experience and they have an overall emotional reaction. You can be as careful as you can possibly try to be with how you do this, but until somebody tells you how it felt to read it, you don't know. Until someone says how it felt to look at a picture or watch a dance or read a book, or read a section of a book. You simply don't know. And the objective nature of striking a match is much clearer than is a story good.
Mm.
It can be really, really hard. So this is where readers are so important. There are ways in which you don't know what you've written until you get feedback from someone. But then, if you are writing something you care about, it's very, very easy for your emotional reaction to be one of fear. We just recently were having a conversation with someone who was rewriting a piece that someone else had done, changing some things, and it was causing some stress. There's so many reasons why that can happen. Writers can be very fragile
Hmm.
emotionally. Artists can be very fragile. We're putting our feelings out there, but there's also the fear. Am I good enough? What happened to all the work I already put in this? Can I get there? What are you saying about me if you're criticizing them? There's so many people who've been so afraid of criticism that they literally won't send a story into publication. They'll just put it in their desk drawer. They'll leave it there because they
Hey,
don't want to be rejected.
I'm raising my hand right now. My novel, The
Yeah.
Between, right? My first novel. I wrote it for a contest, which that's a whole different thing. Contests can be as competitive as trying to get an agent or an editor, right? It's not always easier. So, but I didn't win the contest. So I thought, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not ready yet. And I stuck it in a drawer for a year before it really took panic attack symptoms because I was halfway through writing My Soul to Keep. I was writing every day. I was doing everything I had promised myself a writer should do, but some part of me knew that I was full of it because I had never seriously submitted that first book. I would rather write a second book than submit the first book to an actual agent. And it's so, but I mean, I sold it within like 3 weeks of the decision to pull it out of the drawer. Not even lying. It was that close. I just didn't know it.
Well, this here we're talking about feedback.
True.
I think we started the question with notes. But what is also true, in my opinion, is that the best feedback in the world is a check that clears the bank. A check from a stranger, a professional stranger who is betting their reputation on your skills. So
Absolutely.
submission is that's why the life writing 6 step process, the third step is you polish and submit it. You put it out in the world. Now, in polishing it, you might also workshop it. So you could get feedback from a circle of friends and associates at one point, and then you send it out into the world to hopefully get the feedback that says, yes, we'll gamble our money on you. That's what you want. People thinking, wow, this person is so good, I will give them money and then I will put it out there knowing that if people love it, my reputation as an editor will rise. If they hate it, my reputation as an editor will fall. That feedback, that trust, in any arena in which you want to get better, you need to set it up so that you're getting feedback. That idea of fail forward fast. That in order to get bad feedback, you have to be able to look at any feedback as useful information. If you don't do that, the expression on your face will make your friends lie to you about what they think about what you've just written. They don't
Mm.
dare tell you the truth because you start crying on them. So you have to, if your commitment is to being the best you can be, you have to put yourself in situations where you can get feedback as to what you have done. If you don't do that, you will never be the writer you can be. You're never going to be as good at anything as you could have been.
This is reminding me of one time Jordan Peele dropped into my UCLA class. Not that I'm name dropping or anything. No, but he did. He did. He did. And one of the things he said that I still think about to this day, a student asked him this question about feedback. And I can just guarantee you Jordan Peele has heard some terrible feedback. And one of the reasons I know this is true is because when you're working in Hollywood as opposed to writing prose, sometimes the feedback has nothing to do with how good or bad the project is. It just has to do with, is it too expensive? Is it running against a trend that the company thinks, isn't popular right now? I mean, is the executive afraid of losing their job? Like there are all kinds of other factors in the mix in Hollywood, especially. And the student asked, how do you deal with like bad feedback? And he basically was mirroring what you said. He doesn't think there's really any such thing as bad feedback. I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, like, for instance, if an executive says of his script, oh, that scene is too violent, he's already thinking to himself, well, that's too bad because I'm not going to make that scene less violent. But the note under the note, that's what I call it. The note under the note is that the violence was not emotionally satisfying for that reader. Maybe the violence did not seem warranted. Maybe the violence did not seem important to the plot. So rather than rushing back like a novice screenwriter might rush back and take all the violence out of the scene, right? Like, because you want to please them, you want to sell it, you want to get that check. But when you're a little more relaxed, when you're a Jordan Peele, what you do is you say, I'm not taking out that violence, but I am going to earn it better so that even this viewer, even this reader will understand why that violence is there. And I think that was a great technique he talked about. Now, I'm not going to
Well,
lie and say, no, go on.
I wanted to, yeah, I wanted to say something, and that is that of all the different arts, it seems to me that the art that gets the most brutal feedback the fastest is the comedian, especially stand-up comedian. And we know that Jordan Peele has done stand-up. He has done
Yes,
it, whether it's in groups or as an individual. If you do the joke and nobody laughs, that is instant feedback that you failed, that you
true.
failed, and that I think is one of the reasons why comedians drink. I mean,
Absolutely. Oh my
I mean,
God.
it could be months. I can write something and it can be months before I find out what people think about it. Years sometimes. But a comedian, you do it, you're right up there. So
That's
you
tough.
have to ask yourself, what does criticism mean? What does it mean if somebody says something negative, if somebody says something positive? I feel that any feedback I get, I want to take it seriously enough to be able to ask, do I think that there's something there? Do I believe that they could be right? Because they might be, in which case there was something I could learn from this.
Right.
But I
And
also have to understand that there are things, there are criticisms that have nothing to do with what I'm trying to accomplish, and so I should need to ignore them.
that is the hardest part, knowing what feedback to heed and what feedback to ignore. And I wanted to talk about a couple of situations where I've worked with writers where they felt like they were being damaged by feedback and actually feedback they probably should not have heeded. And that happens a great deal, I think, with marginalized writers. So I used to teach in a program that attracted a lot of marginalized writers, all different ethnicities and queer writers. And in their application essays, person after person after person who had been to an MFA program felt that they had been stifled in that program because rather than being judged on the quality of their prose and their storytelling, too many of their readers who were not of their background were getting hung up on small things like, why does this word have to be in Spanish? Why is this Black character using the N word? Because, well, for years and years and years, a lot of people have been taught that's the worst word in the English language. So there's a real trigger for some readers when they see that word and it stops the conversation cold. And they felt like they still don't know if they're any good because they spend so much time just trying to be in the story. Like, yes, this is a character from India. She's going to be using this spice you've never heard of, and I'm going to name it here. But is there an emotional impact? Is the character well drawn? They felt like they weren't getting that. So sometimes if you are an other in a writing group, you're going to fear, whether it's true or not, that you are being judged by a different standard and that the other writers are not giving you the kind of really rich, meaty feedback you need. It's all surface difference rather than getting to the core of it. The other situation happens sometimes in MFA programs, which can be very competitive, when writers are trying to look good by tearing you down. And I've never experienced that in any of my workshops. I definitely would not tolerate it, but I can absolutely believe that it happens, especially the more prestigious, and the favorite, I won't name names, but the one specifically I heard about is one that is one of the top in the country, where you're just showing off for the teacher and you're not really giving an honest assessment of the work.
Yeah, I had a version of that happen when I was in college, and there was a student in the class who this of our creative writing class who was the teacher's pet, and the teacher praised them to the roofs. What I didn't know is that she and the teacher and the student were sleeping together.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, when I found that out, that was, and she's, just tearing my stuff apart and praising his. And I thought to myself, I'm paying money for this experience. Now, I did get revenge later on, but we'll leave that out of the story.
Revenge.
Yes,
Revenge is
vengeance is
sweet.
mine. You have to set yourself up so if you get a wonderful review, if I get a wonderful review, I take it with a grain of salt. It's like I look at it, I don't jump up and down. Because if I jump up and down when it's good, it's going to crush me when it's bad. So I will
Mm.
literally cut the highs and the lows off of those reviews. I don't let myself feel the extremes of either one of them because I want to be able to read every review I can get my hands on. And it's like with the Star Wars novel, there were reviews that liked it for what I thought were not good reasons. And there were reviews that hated it for what I thought were not good reasons. But there were some people who disliked some things, and I thought to myself, yeah, I could have done that better. I wish I'd had more time to do this. I wish but then, of course, the best thing is when you feel like they love it for the right reasons. When they say,
Yes.
oh,
Oh,
they understood what I was trying to do. Oh, they got that. Oh,
they get
we're on the same.
me.
Yeah, they get me. How do you do that? How do you learn? You have to extract the signal, extract the meaning of the signal without the background noise of the emotion. In many ways, you have to sit on your emotions and see if you can extract the data, is the way I look at it. And that has enabled me to, I don't get to enjoy the positive reviews as much as some people do. On the other hand, the negative ones don't crush me. It's like, oh, another one of those. It's difficult, and every writer and every artist, every human being has to figure their own way to this. How do you, every piece of feedback, every review, every sale or refusal is like a bat sending out a beep and getting an echo back from the walls of the cave. It's helping you understand who you are and what the world is. It's like, well, if you understand the market well enough, you understand the world, then you can look at all the different stories you'd like to write and pick the story that you think would work. It's like there have been stories where I thought I'll never sell that. I'm not going to try. I've got a bunch of other stories first. But the only way to do this is to let the world teach you what it is. So you do your best with your story, and then you send it out. And back to the life writing 6-step process, one of the reasons we have people doing short stories is that if you send out a story, by the time you get feedback on it, you've moved on to the next story. So it's not like you spent 10 years writing a book, and if you get a bad comment on that book, it's just devastating. It literally rips your guts out. It's that in the time it takes you to write a book, you could have written 20 short stories, and you send out your first one. By the time it comes back, you're on story 3. So
Hmm.
at that point, it's a process. I'm on this process called writing, reading, submitting. I read, write, I submit. I get things back. I spend the morning writing. I spend the afternoon, looking at the rejection letter and sending the story back out again. It's just part of the process. You do the process, which over time will lead you to getting that publication that you want. And if
Yes.
you're not getting feedback, if you don't find a way to deal with the feedback without folding into a knot, without curling in, I remember Harlan Ellison telling me that my third novel was not ready to be published. And
Mm.
I was just devastated because I thought the world of Harlan's opinion. I knew that he loved me and did not want to hurt me. He just did not feel that it was good. And I just curled in a ball and cried. I remember it was a dark and stormy night too. So and not only that, but I'd broken up with my girlfriend, so I'm living by myself. And dark and stormy night, and Harlan Ellison tells me my novel isn't any good, and it was just horrifying. So you get up in the next morning and you shake it off and you say, "Oh well," and you get back to work. Because if you don't, you're never going to be a writer. And so if you just look at that as this is part of the process, you have to pay attention, you have to care, but you can't care too much. How do you maintain
That's
that
that's
balance, sweetheart?
That's all great. I think the key for me is the thing I wanted to say here is knowing myself. And I think this speaks to people who are writers or people who are dealing with social feedback, like from girlfriends, boyfriends, exes. If all of your exes are saying the same thing after the relationship, maybe you need to, but it's like you have to. I agree with Steve, art is in the eye of the beholder. So in some ways you don't know what it's about until other people are experiencing it. That is actually true. You don't have control. You can't explain what you meant to everybody who reads your story. But at the same time, you have to know why you wrote why you're writing it, or you have to know why you are the way you are. That's where things like journaling, meditation, therapy, frankly, can be very, very helpful. The better you know yourself, knowing your reasons, why you care so much about this piece of art, why are you spending time working on this story? When you hear feedback that is completely outside of what you're trying to accomplish, it's pretty easy to brush that off. Like, okay, you don't know what I'm trying to do here. That would be a cool story that you're describing, but that's not the story I'm trying to write. And that is a valid response to feedback. But also, sometimes you hear the difficult feedback. And if you're quiet with yourself, you realize you already knew that. You were already worried that that character was underdeveloped, or maybe you had picked the wrong protagonist because all your protagonist does is talk about how great his best friend is. Isn't this the best friend story and not your protagonist story? Like are the first three chapters, why do we need those? Or you knew that. You knew
You
when you
know,
wrote that chapter that that was not where the novel was supposed to start.
look, I can
Sometimes.
tell you one thing that is very useful about all this, and that is faith in yourself. That if
Yes.
you say to yourself, I'm a writer, I don't have all the skills that I need, but I'm going to learn them. I can't do everything I want to do yet. Then the worst criticism is not a criticism of your potential. It's just a
Right.
criticism of where you are on the map at the moment.
Yes.
And if you have faith that over time you're going to get there, then one of the things you do is you can take a look at striking out as meaning you're one of the few who had the courage to get up to bat. Most people won't. Most people won't even try. Most people will dream, but they will not place themselves in positions where their dream can be tested and their reality can be tested. I, I know people who are in horrible situations like that. One woman who, when we were in college together, talked about wanting to be a writer, and her stories kept getting longer and longer until she was writing a trilogy, and then years later she decides that the trilogy isn't what she wants to do and throws it all away and starts the process over again. And to this day, 50 years later, almost, she has never published a thing. she
Right.
she never she never looked at it directly. I am afraid, because if she'd done that, she could either say, I'm not going to do the thing that I'm afraid of, or I'm going to find a way to deal with this fear so I can get on with it and have the life that I want. You can plan either way, but if you think that you can get to any goal that you want without being rejected, that's like saying you think you can be a boxer without getting hit in the face. I mean,
True.
it's just not realistic. So you either deal with that. And one of the ways to deal with that is asking yourself, what does it mean? What does it mean if I get a bad review? What does it mean if this feedback isn't positive. If you think it means I'm wasting my time, you're going to avoid it and you're never going to get there. But if you say that it means that you're taking a step along the path, that's very different.
And in screenwriting, we've learned we have to do that, because so few scripts get produced. You can be in a writer's room and then the show doesn't get picked up or the showrunner gets fired. We've been in that situation actually. So everything to me that has to do with Hollywood is a learning experience, period. It's a learning experience. Well, I may be a student forever. We've had some scripts produced. We did a Twilight Zone episode together for Jordan Peele. We wrote for Horror Noir, the anthology movie. But I still think of myself as a student when I'm dealing with pitches, when I'm dealing with meetings, when I'm in Hollywood. And that is what keeps me from getting frustrated. That's what keeps me from getting discouraged. So find your way to understand, as Steve said, that all negative feedback is an indication that you're not there yet. It doesn't mean you'll never be there. It doesn't mean you wasted your time trying to get there. It doesn't mean even that everyone's trying to hold you back, because it is easy to feel that everybody is trying to hold you back. And sometimes people are trying to hold you back.
Sometimes they are. There's no
That's the
question.
insidious part. We never know when people are actually trying to hold us back. But again,
Actually, I've had more stuff produced than you have, and I can tell you that, I don't know where I am with that. 10 hours of television, 15 hours of television, I don't know. But I do know that getting negative feedback about a pitch, one of the things that means is that I was still able to get myself in position to get rejected.
true, it's not easy to get in
If
those
I get
rooms.
negative feedback about a script, on one level it hurts, but on another level, this is the game. I'm playing the big game.
I'm here.
And yeah, that's right, I'm here. And I take pride in that.
You should,
So
honey. You
one of the things
should.
I know is that professionals take the hits, and professionals create a circle of other professionals who can read their work and give them feedback. That's going back to that thing about feedback. One of the most precious things you can have is a circle of peers who will read your work, who are all working in the field, read your work and give you honest feedback. I think that earning your way into a circle of peers who have the capacity to see things in your work that you cannot see because you don't have eyes in the back of your head, or you need to put it down for a year or 6 months. I mean, Stephen King, I think he puts his stories down for 3 months or something like that. Just factor it in that on the hero's journey, the notion of allies and powers includes the people who will look at what you're doing and tell you honestly what they think and feel and what you need to do to improve. That's incredibly precious. And you can't let your emotions stop you from being able to take advantage of something that could have such an amazing effect on your career.
I will be forever grateful to my friend Robert Famosi from college, who marked the hell out of my short story with a red pen and created my first professional level short story when I followed his feedback. That honesty was a gift. And if you're asked to give people feedback, be kind, but be honest. And I mean, there's a part of me, like people send me scripts sometimes, and I'm like, okay, if you want feedback, I tell it like it is. I say something nice up front. There's always something nice to admire. But if you're really serious, then you can take it. You can take the honesty, and nothing is more exciting to me than when someone is like, "Oh my God, thank you so much." Like I'm a worried, "Oh no, did I go too far?" And they're thanking me. That's it. That's it. So
Now, one of the things that I like to do is to take it away from the question of whether the story is good or not. And I look at whether or not I can see certain elements, the skeleton of drama, the spine of drama. It's like, how, tell me about the story in relationship to the hero's journey. What does the character want? What is their fear? What puts them into motion? Or is all that implied before the story begins? What are the actions that they take? What abilities do they need? And so forth and so on. And that, if you can extract all that from the story, the process of doing that will often clarify a lot that's going on. So whatever you do, whatever you extract from this conversation, understand that the ability to attract people who can look at your work and give you honest feedback is one of the most incredibly precious skills. And that if your emotions stop you from absorbing what happens in that interaction, you will never be the writer you could be.
So, listen, everyone, pay close attention. That is great advice. And hopefully that helps you navigate your way through getting feedback. As we mentioned at the top of the podcast, Steve and I just did a pretty short video, about 12, 13 minutes, about the times we're in and how, particularly writing science fiction and Afrofuturism, can be an antidote and part of a writing liberation practice. So check that out at www.writerwebinar.com just to hear our thoughts on that. www.writerwebinar.com. And in the meantime, we want you to go out and make yourself the hero or heroine of your own story.
The hero in the adventure of your lifetime.
Bye bye,
Bye
everybody.
bye.
Woo! See, we can do a podcast. Maybe not every week, but we're doing it.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun.